Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneur's Gambit. This is a conversation with some very inspiring entrepreneurs that we have in our XB cohort in Bangalore as a part of the GAME initiative. GAME, as you might be aware, uh, exists to create a thriving, vibrant ecosystem where entrepreneurs like all of you can flourish and to go on to create more jobs. And in the next 45 minutes, we'll be kind of delving into the journeys of each of you in terms of your own entrepreneurial beginnings, learnings, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. So let me welcome Aarti,
Hello.
Preeti,
Hi.
and Dr. Vinita,
Hi.
all a part of the XP Bangalore cohort to the show. Thank you very much for being here with us, and thank you for being a part of the game's journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Terrific. So why don't we just kickstart this with a brief introduction of yourselves? You know, what business do you do? Why do customers love you? And also, if you can talk about, what was that trigger point that took you to be an entrepreneur? Right? I'm always fascinated by those journeys. Many people. It's almost like my 10-year-old. Now he's turning 12 this year, but when he was 8 or 9, I used to tell him that when you grow older, you will get something. So, and he always used to ask me, so what is old? And I said 10 years is old. So he suddenly wakes up that morning, then rushes to the mirror and says, I still look the same. I don't look any older. So it's almost like that. Did you wake up in the mirror one morning and say, oh, now I'm an entrepreneur? So what was it for you, Aarti?
So, at the beginning, your question is on the start of the journey, right?
Yes, how did you start off? And maybe you can introduce the business that you do as well.
So I think I've known for about at least 20 years now that I want to have a career in food eventually.
Okay.
So it's been a long time coming.
Wow.
Except that I only got started on it 3 years ago.
Wow.
I bided my time in the meanwhile, paying all my bills and dues and all of that, and being generally a very responsible citizen before I decided to take the plunge into food. And it's been a long time coming, so I've been able to do my research in the meanwhile. At least for about a decade now, I've been training myself on how to read ingredients, for instance, how to put the right ingredients in food, the food labeling, and all of that. So so that's how I got started. 3 years ago is when I formally registered the business, and since then we've been in business as Aartis. We make sugar-free dessert. We make clean label ice creams and sugar-free dessert of all kinds. We aim to be inclusive of every kind of dietary restriction there is while we do our job.
Beautiful. So when you you had this in your mind that you want to be an entrepreneur for a long time. Was there any specific trigger that you said, okay, enough is enough, 17 years I waited long enough and from now I want to start? What was the trigger to start off formally?
So I wanted to be in food even before I knew how to cook.
Wow, okay.
But it was when my daughter was born that I actually started cooking. And because I had to feed her a healthy meal, I started reading all the labels on packets like a maniac for all of us as a family and for her specifically. I started to do that, and that's when I realized that there are so many ingredients that we end up consuming from packaged food that are quite unnecessary. Beyond that, what really was like a game changer for me was that it's possible to make the same kind of food with absolutely healthy ingredients that you would cook it at home. So that was the approach with which we began Aartis. That if you were to make your own ice cream or if you were to make your own sugar-free cookies, what would you put in as an individual? So what we eat, so whatever products Aartis makes, we eat at home as well on a daily basis. So that's kind of a test for us to know. So that was really the turning point for me, that it's possible to make food commercially available with ingredients that you would put in at home too.
Beautiful. Wonderful. So Preeti, let's get to your story.
Sure. So I'm Preeti and I'm a co-founder at Marigold Learn. which is a company into after-school programs for children in the 4 to 14-year-olds, age spectrum. So I'll tell you a very recent story. Like 2 years ago, probably the November before last in 19. So I'd gone for, I was taking interviews for internship at Delhi School of Economics. And in the morning I just went out for a walk. And so I just saw that, there was it was actually the moon in the sky at a 12 o'clock position, So typically, we've seen like sun rising and setting at, 12 noon, the sun is always in the, upward head position. And I was like, it's 7 a.m. in the morning, why do I see a body up in the sky? And I got curious. It didn't, I was like, okay, it's not the sun, it's obviously the moon, that's how it looked like. But what we studied, the moon rises and sets and all of that. So, I couldn't sort of, still connect. And then I called my friends also and I was like, and the next morning again I went and I saw maybe, I was in the days or something. I saw it again there. And then I called my friends, were like, what are you talking about? Can we talk of other things? So, but then I called my, founder and she was like, yeah, maybe. And then, I Googled and then of course, I think the whole thing of, the moon cycle being different from the earth and, why it would have a different position through the day, So I think this kind of curiosity and learning sort of was there. I think that's how I probably learned also when I was younger in school. And what I felt was missing for most of the other children, who were my peers or, who were learning and, when they didn't learn something fundamentally. So, I was applying for my, I applied for my MBA. So I was into semiconductors. I was a hardcore engineer, and then I used to design chips which went into the PlayStations and everything.
Wow.
And then I moved into program management, and I was all set to do my MBA. So I applied to schools in US. I had a Forte Fellowship for Women from Carnegie and Duke and a couple of others. And while doing the MBA applications also, I thought through, obviously those applications also need you to do that. So I think that's when I was pretty sure that it was education, digital in education, taking it to a larger population, along with how to make it fun for the learning. I think all of these elements was what I was looking into, getting into education, doing it. I was trying to go for my MBA and come back and work into something like that. But then when the offers came by and I had resigned and I was all set, okay, I was still thinking I'd parked my first term deposit and everything also. But then I had that thing, okay, why not now itself? Why wait to go and do an MBA and then come back and do it? Probably some of the things I can still learn, and I can possibly take up the MBA even later, So I think that's when, and all along, so my father also, he runs a school. He started it in the year 2000, and in my native. So whenever I would go for my vacations, I would always just go and teach there and all also. So I think that streak of education and how to teach and how to learn, I think that sort of stayed with me. And so then I spoke to a lot of people, I spoke to folks at Agastya Foundation and Manav, who was at Intel, he now runs 1 million for 1 billion and so on. So so I spoke to many of them and then I was like, okay, all set. I was like, okay, let me just do it now. And I think that's how I met Komal, and then she was already into it and I joined her. So that's how we got started.
So what's also interesting is that when you came from the semiconductor space,
right,
and designing chips and
sure,
the software and hardware side, you were exposed to the education space.
Absolutely.
Because your dad used to run a school.
Correct. My dad used to run a school, and then he ensured that we went to some of the finest. So I went to Welland Girls in Dehradun, a totally boarding school. Then I went to DPS RK Puram, and then of course to IIT. So I just went to all forms of education which was there, and even at Welland, what used to happen was every week we used to go and teach children as a, I don't know if many of you would have done ICSE schooling.
Yeah.
There used to be SUPW, socially useful productive work.
Yeah.
So through that, we used to have to take up some activity, and for us, for me initially it started out because we used to go we used to be in the boarding. So the whole excitement was we used to go out of the school, taken in a bus to a school on the outskirts of Missouri, and you teach younger children. And we used to get a bread and jam. So that was a motivation of extra food and a trip out of the school, which would be through the year.
Yeah.
I think so that's how it started, and I think it got built all through. So yeah.
Terrific. let's get you, Vinita. What's been your, if you can talk about what you do and then what triggered you to start off on this.
Yeah, so I'm founder of Dermaglow Laser Skin Clinic in Whitefield. I'm an aesthetic physician. So we were in the US until 2008, and my husband, his company, they sent him to India to set up, one new department. So at that time, my husband, he asked me because I was working in clinical research field.
Okay.
So I have worked for companies like Genentech and
Okay.
Gilead Sciences. So I have worked on many clinical trials, and my job was to report adverse events related to whatever molecules we were studying to US FDA. And I was very happy. My kids were young, life was set. And then we got this opportunity, and my husband is the only son, and in-laws, they were asking us to relocate. So he asked me, would you consider this? So I was not very keen on, coming back to India. So he said, okay, what if, whatever you want, I'll do it for you. But you decide, I really want to do this. So then we thought about it, and I was really interested in laser physics, and I had done few courses on how laser interacts with tissue.
Okay.
So laser tissue interaction and
Okay.
laser application in medical devices, just to understand the science behind laser, like different
Applications
medical
of
devices and application of lasers. And I had also done cosmetology course from National Laser Institute, just because I was interested. So then we decided, okay, when we go back, I'll set up a clinic, and that was my incentive to relocate to India. So that's how I started my laser skin clinic in 2009. But my clinic was located inside a farm, and there was no board outside, so nobody knew about it. And I had rented it from another doctor, and I knew Dr. Arun from the US. He stays in the US, and my husband, he supported me, and for me, like, there were few things which were very important for my clinic. One was that I should have enough parking space, then enough power backup for all my laser devices, and it should be nice surrounding. So I got everything inside that farm. Only thing is, Dr. Arun said that no advertising outside. Okay. So I started my clinic. I was, very reluctant. I didn't know whether I will get a good response or not. But, first month I remember I had worked only 10 days and I made 10,000 rupees. I was so surprised that, without knowing, people
Someone still
came.
came.
Yeah, I was very busy. I was hardly opening up my clinic, and still, people started coming. So that's how I started. I always knew that, ever since I was young, that I want to be a doctor, because I'm third generation doctor in my family.
Okay.
So my grandfather, he did his MBBS from Calcutta in 1945, and he did his post-graduation from Indore. So he was first doctor in entire Barmer district.
Wow.
And but he passed away, unfortunately, when my dad was only 5 years old. So my dad, he was getting educated in one of the best schools in Jodhpur with royals, and suddenly they had to relocate to their village because my grandfather passed away. So there was no school in Jasol, where my dad is from. So he had to, every day he had to commute 17 kilometers to go to another village for his study. So he would wake up at 4, and then he will go to another village, and then he'll come back. He became a doctor.
Wow.
He's a radiologist, and my bua, his grandfather, he decided to, get her married at 16 years of age, I think 14 or 16 years of age. But my dad decided, no, I want my bua to be educated, and she was first postgraduate from their village.
Wow.
So, right from the beginning, I knew that I want to be a doctor. Yeah. Only thing is, like, my paternal grandmother, she was against allopathy. So when I was growing up, my dad, who is totally against Ayurveda, and my grandma, who is totally against allopathy,
Contrasting school of
she
thoughts.
would never take any allopathic medicine, and she would not let us take any allopathic medicine. So I developed this keen interest in Ayurveda as well as allopathy. So I have combined all my interest and passion in this comprehensive medicine and my interest in laser physics, and so that's how I started my clinic.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's always fascinating to hear the triggers, right? I
Correct.
mean, as you said, I will become a doctor, but how do you then combine when what you're saying looks like, oh, it just happened? I'm sure, if you look back, you'll always find a pattern,
Correct.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, if you ask yourself, why did I do the cosmetology course? Why am I interested in laser? Maybe there are no answers there,
Right.
right? One of the things that I'm beginning to learn is that not just as entrepreneurs but as individuals itself, how do you trust your own intuition? How do you trust your own gut feeling when you looked at the moon and when you looked at the education thing and said, I want to do something to spur curiosity? In hindsight, you can connect all the dots you want, but when you're going through it, I'm sure there's a lot of confusion, right? So, what was that? What was the first 100 days for you like? Was it easy, hard? What were the challenges you faced in your first?
So, coming to this industry from the corporate world, I bring only my instinct. And instinct for good food and instinct for clean food is all that I brought to begin with. So the first 3 months were really about just figuring out, setting up, how to set up the operations, and I remember the first 100 days were really about going to expos to just identify the equipment that they need, and we're learning on the fly. Right? So that was what the beginning was. But even then, I knew that precisely because of this lack of background in food, I wanted to be going to market in a way that was frugal and at the same time relevant to today's context, which was online food delivery, the hyper-local food delivery. So it fit right in with my knowledge at that point of time and my need to learn at the marketplace in a relatively frugal way, and it grew from there. So that is the idea with which we went on the hyperlocal platforms. In fact, looking back in hindsight, because hindsight is always 2020,
yeah.
And so 2020 happened, where we saw that everything moved online, from education to food to everything moved online. Online delivery is taken off like never before. So it seemed to have been a good move in hindsight to do this. And we continue to bet on hyperlocal as a channel of growth. Not only in Bangalore. Bangalore we have a fairly good presence, but we still need to cover the other half of Bangalore.
Right.
So we still plan to bet on hyperlocal deliveries, including other cities. And we also intend to, now that we've established a brand in the online world, intend to go to other channels as well and have a multi-channel presence so that we're able to be recognized as a brand beyond the hyperlocal platforms as well, and build a more sustainable brand recognition.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah, and let's get to you, Preeti. What was your first 100 days like? What are the...
Sure. So I think you have two things. So I think one way you said that it's always not just one day when you wake up and you realize that this was what you wanted to do. So I think the process that time to think is generally that, at least for me, the more number of people I kept speaking to.
Yeah.
I interviewed, left, right and center for everywhere. I spoke to folks at Education Initiative, Central Square Foundation, everywhere. I was just speaking. You start, I even applied, to Qualcomm again for program management. The more I went through that interview through the day, by the end of it, although the offer was there, I was like, oh, I'm so sure this is something I don't want to do. So, that's, and when you're talking to someone else, then you know that this is what you want to do. So I think that sort of, starts converging things for you. I think that's where you sort of, start validating your instincts per se. The first 100 days, definitely, I think they were pretty hard as well as exciting, I would say. I mean, one, of course, as entrepreneurs, we start with the notion that, this is what people would want and, kids would want and parents would want, right? For us at least, and but then when you go, obviously there are certain other realities, in Indian education system, there's the reality of marks and, I mean, like, take it or leave it, it's there, and it has a connection to the confidence for kids and it's a need for the parent. So I think that whole utopian thing that, okay, you can work and concepts and play and fun, acha, yeah, the parents say, okay, all this is good. But, if the marks are not there, then this is just a nice to have,
Yeah.
So I think those realities hit us, in the first 100 days. We were like, predominant, like we started at the elder, younger, okay, whichever way we see it. But like we started, like we were initially focused on like 9 to 14 years. Then we realized, that the gaps were coming from, like much earlier. And then, we started moving younger, and now we do like from 4 years. Intuitively, my colleague Komal and I, both of us have technical backgrounds. So we were like too gungo about math and science, But then we started figuring out that, English was where, the first gap was emerging for the children. And if that does not get fixed, then they just start falling behind in everything. So, I think there were many of these changes we made from the customer side, of course, and then so one was like, I think selling all, like keep revising, keep selling it. Then, like when you're going to partners and all, then, some will bash you. I remember going to several schools. One principal, she bashed me up also, like, left, right and center. That, how could you even think about it? So I think all of those things were happening, but yeah, it was fun.
I think, from the outside, being an entrepreneur looks very glamorous.
Correct.
Right? It looks like, oh, you're hustling, you're doing stuff. I still remember my diary from my first day. It's still there somewhere. And it was funny. So I quit my job, sent off. The next day, you're on your own.
Correct.
But what do you do? And I did not have any, I had a co-founders. They had not quit their jobs yet. So you're alone at home.
Right.
So I started off with my mom and all saying, okay, you're starting off, all the best, and small room, and so time hi nahi ja raha hai. I'm saying, what do I do?
Right.
How much work? And those days, not that we had internet. I'm still talking early 2000.
True.
Right? So you speak to a few friends and say, afternoon I had good lunch and I dozed off. Between 2 to 4, I was like, and my father is coming home, he was still working. He said, what are you doing? You quit your job and you're sleeping. What's happening? I said, I didn't know what else to do.
Correct.
Right? I don't think there's enough work. You're still figuring things out.
Correct.
Yeah. So, when you really go into that microscopic detail, the kind of the first 100 days in terms of getting customers, figuring out what you want to do, how will you do it.
Yeah.
Right? Who are your partners, etc. So many details, but it's not that it's all happening here all at one go.
Correct.
True. Right? So when you were talking about your,
I
was just remembering that. Vinita, over to you on your.
So for me, it was ordering my devices, contacting different vendors, and then ordering clinic supplies, and I had ordered few devices from the US, and one was from Germany, and then few were from local distributors. And if we have ordered devices from the US and Germany, there are a lot of formalities which are involved, and I had no idea. It took me around 3 to 4 months just to receive the devices. We had to do the paperwork. I had to get my import-export license, and so there were a lot of things. And then we had to go to Chennai to clear my devices because Bangalore there was no port. So just to figure out the ecosystem for procuring different things for my clinic. Then I had applied for the loan, all those things, and it was my first time. I had no idea, and we had just relocated from the US, so we didn't know many people. So those were the challenges.
So did you have anybody who helped you navigate through all this as you did this?
My husband was very supportive. Of course, he made my website within 1 day.
Oh, that's nice.
And then
He had signed up for the deal. I'm sure you used it to the fullest extent.
right. So like I got support from my parents, and because all the biopharmaceutical companies in Bangalore, they are located in downtown. So if I had decided to join clinical research again, I would have ended up commuting every day, and my kids were young at that time, so I didn't want to do that. So I really like the idea of having my
Things at
own
home.
yes flexibility around that. So it was fun time, but it took me some time to figure out everything.
Terrific. Great. So with this, let's get back to the next segment of really, and I want to deep dive into a little bit about, what kind of research and planning did you do? Did you have a formal business plan? Did you arrive at your costing? How did you do your pricing? How did you arrive at those decisions in the early days, and what are the learnings from that?
So right at the beginning, I knew that we needed to be absolutely unique with the flavors that we create. Because the entry barriers in an industry like food are fairly low, right? So how do we then differentiate ourselves from everyone else who already exists and who are to come in the future? So I set about curating the entire supply chain for Aarti to begin with. So that was one of the most critical elements for me. There were specific ingredients that go into flavoring specific ice creams. And I also wanted them to all be Indian. I didn't want to import vanilla beans or cocoa at all. So all our vanilla, all our chocolate are actually homegrown. Local coffee comes from right here in Karnataka. We get stevia, which is produced in India rather than say in China or Malaysia. So we're very proud of this fact that our curated supply chain is mostly Indian. About 95% of our ingredients are Indian. That was one part of the research. The other part was to understand dessert from a scientific perspective. Ice cream is a delicate emulsion. There's a lot of chemistry involved. So I did a lot of self-studying from textbooks to learn ice cream science in the first place. And once we figured ice cream as a product, because it's otherwise a difficult product to crack. Then the rest of the products kind of flowed very easily because with the right recipe formulations, one can bake easier than one can make ice cream. So ice cream science was important. I also went to Canada to learn with the world's leading dairy scientist, ice cream scientist, Professor Douglas Guff. And did a short course there because I was at that point of time researching the right formulations for the sugar-free ice creams. Wow. So that was a gap in my knowledge to fill in. So that studying with Professor Guff helped me. So I think at each stage, each time that I wanted to launch a new product, there has been a lot of R&D that's gone into it, getting the right sweetener formulated. The sweetener that we use for our sugar-free products are again blended in-house with a proprietary recipe, and to make sure again that we are focused on the nutrition elements, the carb value that is delivered with each dessert. And all of that is very, very important to us. And for it to be safe for our consumers to eat and not have sugar spikes, that's also very critical. So there is a lot of research that goes into the product formulation and how we go to market with these products in terms of how unique they are to the customer palate is also very critical to other attention.
One follow-up question to that. Did you get your pricing right? Did you have to change the pricing? What was the customer feedback and how did you...
At the branding?
At the branding and the whole pricing?
Pricing?
Yeah.
Yes, at the beginning we did get some feedback on pricing, and based on the feedback on pricing, we were also at the beginning we went with a larger size family tub, and we found that there were a few takeaways, but we found that at the price point we were getting some feedback because it's a family tub, it's priced at those many more scoops, right? So that was the first product we went out with. Then we realized that we need an entry-level product And so we worked on smaller sizes. So that involved investment in the packaging, working capital of getting the packaging run to happen. So yes, we were able to be responsive to that feedback by launching a smaller size. And then to increase the average order volume, we launched a mid-size version of between the two, so that we increase the order value on the one hand and we still keep it affordable on the other hand.
Correct.
So yes, there was some responsiveness to the pricing on that front.
Fascinating. I think one of the, especially for niche products, right, and which all of you are, how do you arrive at the pricing? Becomes a very critical thing. I still remember when I did my pricing for Meritrack for the first customer.
Right.
You do your costing,
Cost up and
full cost up, and then and you added every cost. So my partner and I were sitting and saying, "Oh, in 1 month, how many coffees will we drink? Let's put that cost also in." So we did everything,
right.
and when we divided that number by the number of tests that we want to do, that number came to some, if I remember, some 80 rupees or something like that, right? And we thought, okay, let's quote 80 rupees.
Correct.
And client, if he pays us, will be happy. I remember that evening speaking to another sales friend of mine, and I was bouncing this. He says, some advice he gave, said, the rule of thumb is, if you arrived at costing, you never know what cost you'll incur, first time you're doing. Just multiply that by 3 and quote to the customer. I said, are you crazy? He said, try it. What are the worst things that will happen? The customer says no.
Right.
You can always reduce the price.
Correct.
So we went the next day and I said 240 rupees. Right? The customer is looking at us and saying, are you crazy? I said, that's what we have arrived at. Then he said, give me 5 minutes, and he went out. We can't pay you more than 175 rupees. I said, okay, that's double what we are saying. He said, okay, we'll take it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's very important to understand what I've learned. I'm sure that's what you're saying, is it's not about your cost. It's
Correct.
obviously about your cost, but it's about what value
The
the customer is willing
perceives
to perceive it,
Right.
and therefore is willing to pay for it.
Correct. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what was your experiences in the early days of your?
Uh,
You said you spoke to a lot of people.
Yeah, but I mean, I think like from them initially, of course, we didn't get much. I mean, like we were not looking at the pricing inputs and all from them per se. I think those, as most people generally do, we went the cost up way.
Yeah.
And so it's only now that you figure out that like the whole perceived value stuff and everything has to be and so on. That's where but yeah, initially it's like just fill in all the costs and then put a markup, and that's when then you realize you're in a mess, of course. And then like even for in terms of our deliveries, we had like non-standard times, like one session would be like 90 minutes, another would be like 150 minutes, 2.5 session, 1.5, and it would sound very fine to us, because we'd be like, this much time it takes us, to complete that session.
Correct.
But for the parent, it used to be very confusing, so and then like it was not a modular thing. Like the parent to us had to take everything, like they had to take the whole math and science stuff from us. Then I think we figured that no, that's not the way to go. We standardized it to like units of 1 hour. Then it became easy for the parent to understand that they're paying per hour, or like for 20 hours in a month and so on. We made it modular. We allowed them to pick up either math or science, or combination of those, or just English or whatever. Like if they want to do 5 days of English, let them go ahead and do 5 days of English. So I think we went ahead and made those changes, and I think we can. I think on pricing and a lot of like what ancillary businesses you go to, or as Madan put it in one of our sessions, that how do you reframe the field?
Yeah.
So I think we keep doing that pretty much every year. Maybe sometimes like even more than that. Like pricing, Aarti herself, she gave me a very important input in a couple of sessions. Earlier. So when we offer a referral discount, we just give away a cash discount. Like a 10%. It is just easy to do. Then she said that no, just go ahead and try out. Extend the time, give them for a more duration. Now when you look back at it, you feel that makes more sense. And then you're thinking you're selling more of you're making the customer experience more of your product. Why would you leave? And then as another friend of mine, he put it like, why would you leave more money into the hands of the customer, which he or she can go and buy your competitor's thing. So I think with Aarti and this other friend speak, like then it made sense. I think it's just a learning. You start with one, I think, and that probably extends to all aspects of entrepreneurship. That you start with one hypothesis, You just have to be open to, have it unvalidated and keep
Correct.
relearning and correcting.
Exactly.
So I think, that's
Exactly.
what,
Yeah.
happened for us.
Absolutely makes sense. And Vinita, how was your experience, especially given that this is such a niche area? How were you sure that you'll find market takers? What was the work that you do?
Yeah, so when I was in the US, I started my research at that time because I had done this course on medical application of lasers and another course from National Laser Institute. So I was very clear on what kind of devices I want for my clinic. So I had already started contacting the companies and finding out about the costing of all these machines. And when we relocated after that, contacting different maybe doctors, nurses, and trying to figure out the costing of everything, it took me around 3 to 6 months. So I had relocated at the end of 2008, and I started my clinic in June 2009 because it took me 6 months to figure out everything and get all the licenses. Because for establishing any clinic, we need to have a couple of licenses.
Yeah.
So, but like as we meet with different vendors and distributors and doctors, and I also joined Karnataka Medical Council and a couple of different associations. And as we talk to our colleagues, we get a lot more information and we learn along the way.
I think that's coming out clearly from each of your conversations is that you've got to learn quickly, learn fast, and learn from the ground.
Correct.
How much ever theoretical knowledge that we have really gets tested when the rubber
Start doing.
hits the road. So one lesson really to all of us is that really understand the market, prepare well, and adapt fast.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right? Which is an ongoing process. I'm sure after several years we're still doing the same thing
Absolutely.
as well, right? That's very interesting. So with that, let's come to the last segment of this conversation. And maybe we'll start with you, Preeti.
Okay.
Right? So the XB cohort in Bangalore is all about growth.
Right.
It's not about initiating people into entrepreneurship. It's about taking, experienced entrepreneurs like you and figuring out how can we help you to scale to the next level, because our belief is that growth is good for everybody.
Right.
It's good for you, it's good for job creation, it's good for the state, it's good for the bankers,
Sure.
it's good for investors.
Correct.
Right? That's the whole premise of the
Right.
whole XB,
Sure.
the whole acceleration program.
Correct.
So 2 questions. One, how did you decide to be a part of this cohort?
Okay.
Because it does involve a lot of commitment, time, effort.
Right. Sure.
Right? And 2, what's been your experience in learning over the last few weeks? It's been about 8 weeks
8
now,
weeks
I suppose.
Correct. Yeah. So I think so the decision to join the cohort, of course, I think on LinkedIn, it just popped up for me. I think Shrikant from Hogan, he had liked it or something. I think so that's how I saw it, and I got curious about it. I just picked up the call, and as is my thing, I just talk to people. So I just picked up the call, spoke to Shantanu, and for us, what we feel is now we do have the product market fit for what we have built, and we have a set of very loyal customers with referring people repeatedly. So which sort of gives us greater confidence in the in our product market fit now more than ever in the last few years that we've had. And we sort of feel that we are quite ready to scale and grow exponentially. So I think these were the 2 terms which were very clearly the XB I think they spelled it out, that scale and growth. So I think those were the motivations for me to apply and go ahead and join the program. I mean, of course, to learn from people who've been there, done that, and to learn from fellow entrepreneurs too. And yeah, I think the last 8 weeks I think have pretty much been I think I mean, they've just proven that, I couldn't have gone wrong with that decision at all, So I think one, of course, the learning through the sessions, that we've had, especially the finance session, it was like a totally eye-opening session for me, I mean, of course, we deal with numbers, we file our GST and all of that, but I think what else to look at, I think to improve your business metrics, your whole balance sheet and so on, I think it was wonderful, And I think more importantly, the whole learning from the cohort, as I just expressed in the last segment too, like from Aarti, I learned. So I think in each session, I get to learn something from one or the other. Like even just a couple of days ago, I just picked up the phone and I spoke to Vasudha, and she was helping me with like the Facebook ads, because I couldn't figure out what's wrong where. So she was helping me what to look through in those reports and like where to see. Then Nidhi. So I think what I find so interesting is that everyone has, or isn't such a different service or business line, but each can give you so much to learn and what you can apply for yourself too. So like being in education does not necessarily mean I learn from an ed company only. I think I could just learn from everyone else and apply it.
Yeah, no, a lot of research also has proven
Absolutely
that entrepreneurs learn much more in peer groups.
Correct.
Than just, of course, learning online or stage on stage. And I think that's the effect we see happening in the XB cohort, right?
Correct. Yeah.
As you mentioned,
Absolutely.
even though each of you come from different spheres
Correct.
and different fields and different perspectives, but some of the fundamentals are very much
Absolutely.
the same.
Correct.
Right?
True.
So it's very interesting. Aarti, what's been your...
Yes, so I was inspired to apply to the cohort for 3 reasons. Learning, where I view the Accelerator Bangalore program as some sort of e-school, entrepreneur school, if you may. And the second part that I wanted was visibility and a platform from which to tell my story. And the third was access to networks. This wonderful cohort of women and all the relationships that we have established between each other and all the daily inspirations we receive from each other's stories. And these are the 3 main reasons I'm a part of the cohort, and it has delivered on every count for me. Learning where some of the thinking on how to take the business forward has been validated through the sessions that we've had. Visibility, where a platform like your story helps to showcase the journey and the story. And like I said earlier, this amazing group of women entrepreneurs, where we all know that we are in it together. Whichever the businesses that we are running, whether it's a service business or a product business, our journeys seem to be very similar, and we are all learning from each other every day. So it's a wonderful journey.
Wonderful. So it's so heartening to hear. I think this is precisely why the cohort-based approach is what we adopted. To the 3 reasons that you talked about and the way that you've kind of seen them play out is the ideal world for us. So lovely. Vinita,
so I feel that entrepreneurial journey can be very lonely. Most of the time we have to make so many decisions, but we have no mentorship. We have nobody else to give a suggestion or validate our questions or concerns. I'm ready to expand now, but I didn't know how to, and I was looking for some platform, and it happened at the right time. And the biggest takeaway from joining Accelerator Bangalore for me is my openness to market myself. Till now I was not marketing because of 2 reasons. Because my kids were still in school. My son, he's going to go to college now, so I didn't want to take my time away from them. And second thing is, as a medical professional, I had this hesitation to go out and promote myself. And as a clinic we can do it, but as a doctor I'm not allowed to market myself. So I didn't know how to do it. So now, after talking to so many different speakers in Accelerator Bangalore, now I have gotten so many ideas on how to promote my services and how to expand. So for me it's total mind shift.
Wonderful. So with that, we'll call this a wrap. but it's fascinating to hear each of your stories, journeys, and the experiences. And I do hope that you would have inspired a lot more, not just women, but entrepreneurs out there to embark on such journeys and to take the plunge into the unknown and kind of revel in the joy of it. So here's wishing all of you the very best from all of us.
Thank you so much.
And look forward to seeing you grow and be iconic names in the industry and to all entrepreneurs around us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you so much.
for being an amazing host.
My pleasure to host you here. Thank you.
Absolutely.